Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at Angular Gyrus... Wait, that's not it. Different part of the brain? Medulla for the Nintendo Switch. And as I've come to realize about indie games in general, when something's named after a part of the brain, it's either meant to make you really think or make you really tripped out. And while this little indie game actually does fairly well in both areas, there's something about the game you might really want to know, so make sure you stick around for the critiques. Looking at the story though, as we always do, there's not really one to be had, or at least if there is one, I'm not quite certain what it is, and that is something that will also be explained in the critiques. So we're going to sweep that under the rug for now, and move on to the actual gameplay. As far as the gaming genre is concerned, in Medulla it's something akin to a puzzle platformer and a walking sim. And if you're wondering how that's even possible, well, there's one thing in particular that really does draw that definitive line. In the actual gameplay, we of course have some moderate puzzling and some moderate platforming, which definitely throws it into the puzzle platformer genre. But at least early in game, for some of the more complicated puzzles, the developer kinda helped the gamer out with some hints and some tips. And while that kind of hand-holding most certainly doesn't happen in every one of the game's puzzles, it's that kind of focus of the developer to really encourage you to experience the game as opposed to just conquer the puzzles that kind of makes it feel a bit more like a walking sim. In that the overall purpose isn't to triumph over a challenge, it's to have an experience. But in all honesty, that's neither here nor there, and that's up to you to decide whether that's for you or not. So getting deeper into the gameplay, I was actually impressed with Medulla's puzzling, because it was far more diverse than I really expected. Just looking at the game, and even through some of the initial puzzling, I expected it to be something more like Limbo, with pretty much just an ever-increasing difficulty in purely physics-based puzzles. Controlling your timing, moving blocks, jumping over enemies, and that kind of thing. But the further that I got into Medulla, it really did stretch your perception of what exactly a puzzle can be. And on that note, I actually was fairly impressed with Medulla as a puzzle game. Because you're not just going to be jumping and pulling and pushing blocks, you're going to be decoding things and using environments and environmental objects that you may not have even perceived as being available. It's kind of like an M.C. Escher painting. And like I said earlier, any game that's named after a part of the brain is partially, at least a little bit, going to be aimed at tripping you out. And so looking at Medulla visually, it really does very well on that front, with blending foreground and background elements and sending you into potential dead ends just to let your character soar off into the screen. And with various chapters of the game being completely removed from one another, maybe walking through a forest or sailing through space, there's no end of situations to start bending your brain. And I'm happy to say that the audio package for Medulla really does keep up with and support that surrealistic dreamlike scape. But even though there is a lot of fun to be had in the puzzling, and even though if you are a gamer who likes those surrealistic style games, even if you just looked at the screenshots and were like, that's the game for me, there is one more detail about the game that no matter what type of gamer you are, you're going to want to know before you decide to spend your money on it. And out of all of the game's critiques, not the least of which is the occasional lag spike that will really goof up your timing in some of the puzzle's more technical areas. So yeah, even though the visuals are really pretty and I loved what they were trying to do, either the porting didn't really go as smoothly as they would hope, or the Switch's teeny tiny GPU can't quite keep up with it. And as I have played a lot of much more graphically intense games on the Switch, I'm kind of not thinking it's the latter. And there are a couple of other things that lead me to that conclusion, specifically the fact that the game has a few bugs. And while certain bugs are forgivable, as in when I managed to solve a puzzle at the exact same moment I died, and the game sent me back to a black, never-ending load screen, that's forgivable. I'm sure no programmer anticipated solving a puzzle at the exact moment of death. But those type of bugs aren't the only bugs in the game. And specifically, I have to note the one that hit me over and over pretty late game, and by late game I mean about an hour and 45 minutes in, which was completely game-breaking, and anytime you touched a certain portion of the screen to move past this puzzle, your game was over. And it didn't matter if I jumped over it or moved through it or manipulated certain items first. I tried over and over, and every single time it resulted in me getting sent back to the Switch's home screen. And this is why I said before that if the game did have a story, I'm not really sure what it is. And that's because I was physically unable to make it to the end of the game to possibly discover something grandiose. And while I did enjoy the earlier game's puzzles, I really don't enjoy the fact that I paid $9.99 plus tax for a game that I can't even play. And when a game is glitched so bad that you quite literally can't even pass a certain portion of the screen to move on, it really doesn't speak very highly of the porting, the development team, or even Nintendo's eShop management itself for not being a little bit more thorough with their quality checks. And so if you were looking forward to this game, if you saw the footage and you were like, oh, that game looks great, that's exactly what I was looking for, well, I just have to issue a caution of buyer beware, because until these bugs are fixed, the game is pretty much unplayable. Or at least it's unplayable past the hour and 45-minute mark. But if you're looking for some other trippy indie games to play, there's a lot of them out there. One that we just reviewed was Path to Mimicini, and I'll be posting the link to its review in case you want to check it out. And there's a whole mess of other even more bizarre ones, such as Infamy, which I'll be honest, not a lot of people like, but if you're looking for trippy, it is. And if you're just looking for a really bizarre puzzle platformer, maybe check out Tamashi. But anyway, this does about wrap up the review of Medulla now for the Nintendo Switch, so if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a comment or a like to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. Because there are new and unique indies coming out literally every single day, and in the thousands of them on the eShop, while there are some that are pretty inarguably hard passes, there are dozens of absolutely unforgettable gems. So if it's on the Switch, chances are you're going to find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.